Thank you for joining us today for Supporting Members from a Distance, a webinar for AmeriCorps VISTA leaders. I'll be your host, and I'm Eric Powell, a training specialist with the VISTA program at AmeriCorps headquarters in Washington, D.C. I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague, Andy King, who is our main presenter. Andy is a senior training specialist here at VISTA headquarters who plays several roles in supporting VISTA leaders, not only through his work on this webinar series, but also through the VISTA Leader Orientation, the VISTA Leader in-service training, and in developing resources for the VISTA campus. Andy, it's so great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with so many AmeriCorps leaders in the VISTA program. You know, long-distance relationships of any type aren't easy, and most VISTA leaders support teams that are spread out, whether that's across a city, as we've seen in the chat, a state, a wider region, maybe several states, or even the whole country. So I'm hoping this conversation will shed some light on ways that you can do that effectively. Our session focuses on three aspects of providing member support when the team is spread out. First, we'll look at some types of support that members might need or support that could benefit them. Next, we'll identify some of the challenges that come with distance relationships. And finally, we'll describe three main roles for VISTA leaders in supporting their members. So first up, it'll help us to understand what are some of the more common types of support that VISTA members might need. Before I dive in on the topic, I'd like to hear from you on what you've observed. So Eric is going to introduce our first activity.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, we're going to be using a chat activity because we really want you to be able to share your thoughts with your colleagues. So we're asking you to respond in the chat now to the question you see on the screen. What are some areas in which your members need support? And just to make sure that we can all see your response, please make sure that you select everyone from the drop-down menu so that your message is broadcast to all of us. Again, we're looking to see what are some areas in which your VISTA members need support. We'll give you a moment to respond, and as your comments come in the chat, if you don't know the answer yet, I'm sure you'll know soon, but in the conversations you've had with your members and the discussions you've had, where do you see areas of support needed by your VISTA members? Taking a look at a couple of them, some need some general information on reporting and how to capture their accomplishments and their achievements. Orientation, some of them don't really understand the grasp of what they're trying to do and really understanding what AmeriCorps VISTA members do. And then looks like quite a few responses are around technology support and making sure members have access to what they need and being able to fulfill their VISTA assignment description duties using all things technology. A lot of good responses coming in. Andy, what are your thoughts or what are you seeing based on all this information?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So there is a range of areas here, but a couple themes are starting to arise. Reporting for sure, tracking and managing data, some of the communications pieces, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then some of the big things, community outreach, right? Like how do you engage a community? How do you reach people that you're trying to support and serve? So some, a whole range, some very granular, some very big and broad types of areas. So these are great, and hopefully thinking about where your members might be needing support gives you a little bit of grounding. So good work on that. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at what it can mean to support your members. So when considering the types of support that your members might need, you might find it helpful to think about support from two different sides. The first side is supporting the member as an individual, as a person first and foremost. And then second is supporting the service that the member performs and the needs related to that service. And when we talk about supporting the individual in their work, that can encompass a lot, as I'm sure you can imagine. There are many different models out there, but we're going to use one that identifies 6 dimensions of wellness. A person's well-being can suffer when any one area is threatened, even if it's not impacted directly. So let's look at each of these briefly to get us thinking about ways that we might be called on to support our members. First is the emotional dimension of wellness. Supporting this emotional dimension might include helping the member adjust to changes, like being homesick or feeling anxiety about their life after VISTA service. The occupational dimension could involve providing guidance in their service activities, offering them professional development opportunities, or helping them to build a resume. The physical dimension may mean assessing the VISTA member, or rather assisting the VISTA member in finding housing and affordable food or setting a budget. It could also include helping the member to access their VISTA benefits like healthcare, dental, counseling, childcare. You might also assist them in feeling safe and secure. To support the social dimension, you might offer to introduce your members to others in the organization or the community, or help them with problem solving around issues with roommates or a landlord, or perhaps their interpersonal relationships there in the service site. In the intellectual realm, you might want to support the VISTA member for who they are outside of their role on the project. Help them explore and acknowledge their gifts, their strengths and talents. This might translate into creating some long-term goals for their life after the service. And finally, the spiritual dimension might be supported by reminding your member to spend time doing activities they enjoy, like spending time in nature or on other hobbies, or engaging in specific spiritual practice of their choice. If the member practices journaling, that could be a way for them to reflect on themselves as well as the service they're providing. Of course, each member has unique needs, concerns, and personal challenges. Here are some potential areas of support that your individuals might need. The first is in connecting with others. So sort of in that social realm, many members serve as the only VISTA at their site, and that can be a pretty lonely situation. Others at the organization might not get what a VISTA member does or understand the struggles that they're facing. So members can often benefit from really feeling that they're part of a team of other VISTA members who can provide understanding, validation, as well as moral support. Team meetings and other opportunities for real-time interaction can help them connect with their peers and develop strong, supportive connections. It's important that VISTA members know they're valued as people and not just the products they produce or the service they provide. Leaders who get to know their members beyond the work they're doing can help those members to feel valued and cared for. And though some might think that supporting the individual is nice to have but not essential, there's a lot of research showing that an individual's well-being can have a big impact on their work or their service. A member who's worried about their finances or distracted by concerns about their living arrangements won't be as effective as they could be. A happy and supported VISTA equals strong service and a thriving community. So supporting individual members really is essential. Let's shift now to sort of the other side of that coin and look at the service-related needs. So in terms of those service needs or service-related needs, here are 3 categories that we're going to take a look at where leader support might come into play. First, our needs related to the member's VISTA assignment description, the VAD. We've heard from members that once they get into their service, their day-to-day activities can sometimes feel disconnected from their VAD. Leaders can help members to feel and remain connected to the project by discussing the impact of the members' work and how they can keep progressing to ultimately accomplish the VAD's goals. A lot of members come to VISTA to gain work experience and expand their career opportunities. So a natural part of having VISTA members is supporting their work and career goals. Leaders can provide insight on workplace dynamics between coworkers or supervisors. They can add clarity around the role or mission of the sponsoring organization within the broader landscape of the community, and providing opportunities for members to celebrate their successes and reflect on their future career goals, as well as their personal goals, can help maintain their motivation while building their experience with setting goals for the near future in service. For some VISTAs, this may be their first time working in a professional office situation, so they might need some guidance on how things work. Likewise, there may be specific skills they need to develop so they can perform their service well. Conducting a survey is one way to find out what your members need. So you can see here, there are a lot of areas where members might need support, both with their service as well as in their personal lives. So let's pause a moment to consider to what extent a VISTA leader is expected to respond to all these various needs. In any sort of helping relationship, there needs to be balance between what the helper is doing and what the person seeking help is doing for themselves. And the helper has a responsibility to stick to what they're capable of providing. So the way to do this is by setting and consistently reinforcing boundaries. As a leader, you'll need to set boundaries about the type and the amount of support that you can provide. You'll have certain skills and a finite amount of time that you can devote to member support. You can start by stating the limits of your expertise as well as your role as a VISTA leader. You might also set limits on what subjects you'll explore with your members. Some examples might be, I'm not a therapist or a tax professional, so I'm going to suggest you speak with someone better equipped to help you. Another example, I can spend 30 minutes helping you brainstorm possible steps that you can take to resolve this for yourself. You'll also want to create space for VISTA members to share, but don't push them or force them to disclose. You aren't entitled to personal information about your members' private lives, and neither are other members of the team. So be sure to give your members an out to not have to disclose certain information. Also, be sure to establish norms for the whole team around confidentiality and get members to pledge to uphold them. And finally, avoid rescuing behaviors. Here's something I learned from a social worker I worked with a number of years ago. He said, you know you're in trouble when you're working harder than the client is. So the idea here is to resist the urge to fix things for your members. Instead, support them in solving their own challenges by encouraging them to identify their own solutions and then to take action. You can also refer them to other sources of support as a way to empower them to access resources that they choose. So that's just a little bit about boundaries. There's a lot more that can be said, but I'd like to check in with you to hear what you might be doing already to set boundaries with your members.
We'll ask you once again to open the chat panel and share what you're doing in the area of boundary setting or what you think would be helpful to other VISTA leaders. Go ahead and respond to the question. And again, please make sure that you select everyone in the drop-down menu. What advice would you give other leaders on setting boundaries with members? I'm guessing you may have some experience with this, or maybe in your time as a leader, you've heard other comments or advice from other leaders. So feel free to share your comments now. See several of them coming in, some of them focusing on the best advice is to set boundaries immediately. I think that means when a member first starts and get them on the right track so that they can hit the ground running. Clear communication up front and often so that everyone knows they're on the same page and everyone knows what the boundaries are. I really like scheduling meetings, structured meetings, meetings that are regularly occurring so that people know what's going on when and the members have expectations to set. And then I also really like this one about, it kind of summarizes several of the comments that have been shared about not getting too personal. That actually ties in well with what Andy mentioned about keeping it professional, understanding what the members need and what the boundaries are, but also being respectful of that personal space. Andy, I'll turn it back to you to see if there's other themes or comments you want to share.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric, and thanks to everyone who shared here. A couple of things. Several of you mentioned this in different ways that it's important to set boundaries early in the relationship, right, from the outset. Do it immediately, so that there's no misunderstanding. Because once you get into a pattern, or once expectations might take shape in your members' minds, it can be harder to undo those than it is to set them from the beginning. So that, I think, is a great piece of advice that several of you have shared. And then there are a lot of other specific ideas as well for how you can do it, and the fact that there are limits to what's expected and the amount of sharing that goes on. So thank you for participating in that activity. I want to move on and take a look at some of the challenges that you might face in supporting your members. So first up, it's important to acknowledge that supporting a team from a distance is not easy. So it might be helpful to understand what some of those challenges are that make it not easy, so that you'll be better able to work to overcome them. As my colleagues and I were thinking about the different challenges that come with remote teams, we saw some commonalities begin to surface. So we landed on three main categories of challenges that you might face while providing support from a distance. First is what we are calling limited visibility. You're not seeing your members on a regular basis, so it's hard to really know what's happening there. Next is communication, which is always a big factor in leading a team, and remote communication can be fraught with issues, as you probably know. And finally, having limited knowledge about a VISTA site or the community where your members are serving. So we're going to take a look at each one of these. Leading from a distance creates a challenge of limited visibility. No two members are the same, and their needs are going to vary. If you're not seeing your members on a regular basis, it can be hard to know the status of their VAD tasks and what the members are accomplishing based on reports alone. There could be a disconnect between what a member is accomplishing and what the supervisor or the site staff convey. And some people don't easily ask for assistance. So your member may give the impression things are okay, even when they're not. When you can't physically see your members, it can also be a challenge to gauge their workload, their availability, and their emotional state. And that makes it harder to offer support when it's needed. When you can't witness the day-to-day, you have to rely on the member to share information about their challenges and successes, so you know best how to support them. Another challenge of leading from a distance can be remote communication challenges. Misunderstandings can occur due to differences in communication styles, time zones, reliance on digital tools, the list goes on. Some members respond better to verbal communication than they do to written, so email alone might not be effective, and you'll need a way to check their understanding. Each member may prefer different communication tools, and they may vary on things like response time. Also, since you're probably holding online meetings, you may find some members are quiet or they don't participate well in that setting. You might not be able to accomplish everything you need to in a team meeting. Some members may be reluctant to check in and to let you know when they need support. As we noted, some people don't like to ask for help, perhaps out of a desire to figure things out on their own, or maybe it's because they don't want to be seen as less than competent. For others, the resistance may be related to their relationship to authority figures in general, their view of assistance as meddling or micromanagement, or it could be any number of things. So it's critical for leaders and supervisors to coordinate on this and determine who will provide support in which areas and what they'll be communicating to each other. And since members are often serving in different communities and different offices from that of the leader, it can be hard for the leader to know everything about each of those different sites. What's it like to serve in that community? What are some of the challenges there? And in that particular office, what's the site supervisor like on a day-to-day basis? Who else is the member serving with? And what resources or assets are available to the member? And what are the workplace norms and the culture like at that site? Much of this information might be unknown to the leader, which makes it hard to brainstorm or problem solve with the member or to refer them to other sources of assistance. All right, so I've just laid out some of the challenges that can come with remote support. And now I'd like to give you a chance to share some ideas on how you might overcome some of these challenges.
With this chat activity, we're going to switch the conversation from challenges to solutions. So we'd like to know, what are ways that you increase your knowledge of your member service sites? I love this idea of going from challenges to solutions because it's so easy to mention challenges and sometimes difficult to think about solutions. But what are the ways that you can increase your knowledge of your member service sites? Or do you have thoughts on this comment? I see frequent site visits, which certainly could be physical site visits if you have the ability to do that, or perhaps virtual site visits. Asking lots of questions and encouraging research to learn more, to really understand about your service sites and your members at those sites. Lots of comments on meetings and just making sure people have their schedules intact, and you can really learn a lot from meetings, especially if they're well structured and planned in advance. And then I see several comments around weekly updates, which could take the form of a newsletter or an email or some kind of a status check so that all the members are reporting information weekly about their service sites and their needs, their questions, their concerns, their accomplishments. These are great responses. I encourage you to keep them coming. And again, Andy, let me know if there's something you see that I'm missing.
I agree, Eric. These are great ideas. And so, even if you posted something there, I encourage you to take a look at the ideas your colleagues are posting, because there are some great things. A number of folks mentioned doing some kind of research, like reaching out, asking questions, trying to gather information. Some of you mentioned site visits, doing them either in person or somehow remotely. And then one that stood out for me that I thought was really nice was doing meetings with the member and their site supervisor, and if there are other key folks at that site, sort of doing a site meeting. So that way you're seeing the member in context with their supervisor and perhaps others. So you get a little bit of a sense of how they work together and how they interact. And that way they're hearing the same information from you at the same time, and you're hearing from both of them in the same context. So I really like that idea, as well as many of these others. So thank you again for sharing in this activity. All right, let's turn our focus now to looking at some of the things that VISTA leaders can do to support their members at a distance. I'm going to share a framework and a few ideas, but here's a little heads up. I'd really like to hear what you're doing in a few different areas to support your members. So leaders play various roles, I've said that a few times, to effectively support their members. We're going to focus on 3 particular roles today. The first is that of communicator, second is coach, and third is cultivator. And by that, I mean someone who's developing a supportive climate and culture. First up, communication. So to lead from a distance effectively, we need to prioritize clear communication so that information flows smoothly to everyone, regardless of where they're located. First, the communication needs to be timely, and one way to do this is by scheduling regular check-ins. Depending on the size of your team, these could be one-on-one check-ins or group check-in meetings. And to make your check-in effective, you'll want to have a standard agenda that you follow each time, so both you and your members will know what's going to be covered and can come prepared. We have an on-demand webinar that's about effective check-ins, so if you're interested in how to set them up, you can check that out, and we'll share a link to that near the end of the presentation. Communication also needs to be accessible to everyone on the team, as well as easy to use. So make sure that the communication tools you provide can be accessed by everyone, and that they meet the team's needs, not just your needs. Some examples might be using messaging channels and a file sharing platform to house tools for tracking and reporting on VAD activities. Where possible, use tools that also encourage communication among your members, not just between you and them. Team communications can help individual members feel part of something bigger. It can offer them examples of what others are doing, and it can open channels for peer support. To make your communications helpful, keep in mind what your members need and then provide that. This can include keeping them up to date on what's happening with the organization or the VISTA project, reminding them of upcoming events and deadlines, and other information that they're going to find useful. Some examples here are reminders to complete timesheets or to submit their regular data reports. And another way to make your communication effective is to use consistent mechanisms, such as a weekly newsletter or a blog, which can reinforce some of the messages that came in these other forums, those that were sent through communication tools or from your check-in meetings, as well as the project reminders and deadlines. Compiling the information into a regular formatted vehicle cuts down on the number of messages, and it gives your members a more centralized place where they can look for the information they need. For example, newsletters and blogs often have standard sections in each edition, making it easier for you to organize and present the messages, and it makes it easier for the reader to navigate to the information they're looking for. Communicating member support can encompass guiding members in a few ways. Starting with their first day of service, you can orient them to their role by getting them familiar with the work environment, facilitating connections with relevant individuals in the organization or the community, and sharing valuable service-related details. You might also offer support to the members, helping to prevent obstacles and enabling them to effectively fulfill their VAD. A significant aspect of supporting the member includes addressing personal needs, particularly assisting members who relocated and adjusting to make ends meet on their living allowance. That way you can help ensure their financial stability. So that's just a bit about the communicator role for leaders in supporting a dispersed team. Next, I'd like to hear what you're doing to communicate with your team and to see what ideas you might have about other ways leaders can use the communicator role effectively. So Eric is going to explain this next activity.
Thank you, Andy, for walking us through how and when to communicate with VISTA members, because as Andy said, now we'd really like to hear from you. And in this activity, we're going to be using a collaborative whiteboard site called Mural, and I'll explain how you can use it. So first, you're going to click on the link that you'll see in the chat in just a moment to access the Mural whiteboard. Then once you're on the site, you'll click on the button that says View as Visitor, and you'll see it below those two buttons. Then on the next screen, you can enter your name, or you can simply select View as a Visitor again if you don't want to enter your name. But once you're in the mural, you will double select any open space to create a new sticky note. We do ask that you please be careful not to delete or type over someone else's sticky note. So as you listen to those instructions and go ahead and access the mural whiteboard, the first question that we're going to ask you to answer is, what strategies do you use to be an effective communicator? So we'll give you a little bit of time now to follow the link in the chat and begin adding your responses. Thank you very much. See some responses coming in. I'll turn it over to Andy in just a minute. But as a reminder, once you're in the mural, you want to click on View as Visitor. And then once you actually see the screen, you'll need to double click to add a sticky note to make sure that you can actually type in a response and we can see it. So we look forward to seeing and reading some of your responses. Thank you to those who are currently responding. Andy, I'll turn it to you to give a summary of what we've seen or kind of how this is working so far.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric, and thanks for the folks who contributed to the board already. So several themes showing up here in the effective communicator role around regular team meetings, using emails or other regular communication channels to keep folks informed. And one person mentioned having morning huddles, so like a quick informal meeting to allow folks to get together and be on the same page before the day gets started. You know, and having an open door policy, right? That can also, just setting an inviting environment, kind of gets to the cultivator role in a little bit, but just having that open door, open email, open, you know, like, hey, reach out to me, call or email me if you need something. You know, other Slack channels, Discord channels, other types of group chat and communication platforms. So great work here. Thank you for sharing these ideas. I really like the different approaches that we're seeing. So let's move on. If you want, you can continue to add there, but we'll go ahead and we'll move on and look at the role of coach. So leaders are not expected to directly resolve issues on behalf of their members. Instead, leaders can coach them to resolve issues on their own. Coaching, of course, is a huge topic, but for our discussion right now, I'm going to summarize very simply by describing 4 things a coach generally does with a member. First, it's important to set the foundation when you sit down the very first time with someone. The key to coaching is to set expectations around what the coaching is, the roles each of you will play, and a goal, a time frame, and a process for the coaching experience. A coach really facilitates dialogue. This starts by listening to the individual, helping them discover, clarify, and then align what it is they want to achieve. And throughout the dialogue, the coach asks questions and then listens intently to the individual's responses. Communicating effectively and facilitating a conversation with the individual can really encourage self-discovery. Coaching is not about giving people the solution, but helping them find the solution themselves. A coach guides the individual to cultivate learning and growth to transform their own learning and insight into action. And it's key that the coach holds the individual responsible and accountable for reaching their own goals. A coach can do this by encouraging the member to set milestones and deadlines, and then periodically check in with the member to see how they're progressing. You'll probably find that some of your members will want to be coached and others might not. A key factor is that coaching has to be something the individual wants. Coaching for member support can encompass guiding members in a few ways. Since leaders aren't supervisors, they act as peer coaches to the members of the team. Peer coaching takes into account the level of collegiality and collaboration you share with your members, and the fact that you're not evaluating them, managing them, or telling them what to do. Instead, you're supporting them in their efforts to reach their own development and well-being goals. With a work plan and that implementation, leaders can support members and help them assess where they are with their VAD and activities that they're supposed to complete to reach their goals. Coaching can help members break their activities down into smaller tasks and then determine a time frame for making progress. Coaching in terms of the VISTA leader role can invite reflection and action on topics like self-care, the cycle of service challenges, and work-life balance, where the leader is stepping in to focus on the member as a person and providing the balance needed to support both the individual and the work. You can find some detailed information about coaching, including some suggested questions for facilitating dialogue and guiding members through their challenges on an on-demand webinar. It's on the VISTA campus. It's called Coaching Skills for VISTA Leaders. I'm going to ask you to use the whiteboard again to hear what you're doing to coach your members and to see what strategies other leaders might be able to use. So Eric's going to prompt us again on how this process works.
Absolutely. Now that we've gotten some experience with the whiteboard, we'd like to hear your perspective on the coaching role. So the question is, what strategies do you use to be an effective coach? You'll see a new link to the mural in the chat. So you want to make sure to click on the new link that we just posted. And again, you'll select the link to access the whiteboard. Don't forget to click on View as a Visitor, and then you'll need to double click or double select to open a new sticky note for each strategy. So we'll give you a little bit of time to follow those instructions and insert your sticky note to the question, what strategies do you use to be an effective coach? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I still see some responses coming in. We appreciate all the feedback around what strategies you use to be an effective coach. I know coaching is such a critical role for VISTA leaders. So Andy, as responses are still coming in, what ideas do you see? What can we take away from this?
Yeah, a lot of what I sort of feel like compassion coming through in these comments and these ideas, right? So focus on being supportive, encouraging, focusing on self-care for the member, and really making sure that you've got a solid foundation. So building that rapport, strengthening your relationship, showing empathy. I think it's really lovely that so many of you have expressed that approach for this coaching role. So well done, I will say. Keep those ideas coming. If you haven't had a chance to drop yours in, feel free to do that. But from here, we're going to go ahead and move on to the third leader role, and that is cultivating a climate of support. And I'll start by saying, as amazing as you VISTA leaders are, you can't be all things to all members or be capable of meeting every single need. So the third leader role is that of cultivator, that is creating a climate and a culture that encourages peer support among your members. You'll begin by building your team culture at on-site orientation and training. So remember to engage with your new members as individuals, remember, during early on during that orientation. You can continue building your team culture during your regular meetings or calls, and then whatever touch points that you have with your members. During your interactions, you have an important opportunity to model different ways to provide support. By modeling support, you'll help your members learn how they can support each other. And as I mentioned, you can't be everywhere. So a key approach is to foster a community of VISTA members who connect with each other and who draw on the strengths and resources of each one of the team members. And in the end, it's going to benefit the whole. In terms of some specific practices, group meetings are a great place to engage members to talk about common issues that come up as part of the process of creating a culture of support. Consider walking the team through the ups and downs that many members face as a way to sort of front load and prepare your members for these common experiences. You can plant the seed that while you are a resource for them, their fellow members who may be experiencing similar things at the same time might be even more valuable resources. Use your team meetings to engage your members by finding out what they want to know and allowing them to get acquainted with one another. One way to do this is providing time for different members to share out or lead an activity during the meeting. That'll give your members a chance to get to know each other and identify their shared interests or potential resources within each other. And another idea is to use a crowdsourcing approach for peer support, which allows members to share their needs so others can offer help and resources. One specific example is what's called a reciprocity ring. In a reciprocity ring, each member makes a request to the group for something they need. It could be a service or an item or a connection or some kind of help, something that they cannot provide or find for themselves. The other members of the group then use their collective resources, their ideas, their knowledge, and connections to help fulfill each of the requests. This tool has been used to help people find housing or a commuting buddy, to get help completing a project, to learn a new skill, to land a dream job, and many more examples. It can provide the framework for people to ask for what they need and to contribute what they can to others. You can find detailed information about cultivating member connections on an on-demand webinar called Onboarding Practices That Empower Members. Okay, so we're going to go back to the mural board one more time to hear what strategies you can suggest for cultivating a supportive culture that maybe your fellow leaders can use. Eric?
Thanks, Andy. So we've talked a lot about cultivating a climate and culture of support, which we know are so critical for members. So we're going to ask you to click on the new mural link that you see in the chat and post your sticky note to the question, what strategies do you use to foster a culture of peer support on your team? And as a reminder, when you double click, make sure you double click outside of the blue banner for your sticky note to work. You have to double click in the white area to be able to add your comments. So we'll give you time. Again, click on the link, click on View as a Visitor, double click in the white space area to insert your sticky note, and we'll share the screen and we'll review a few responses in a minute. Well, Andy, I'll turn to you in just a moment, but I have to quickly say, from my previous experience as a VISTA leader, I wish I had all these answers and comments when I was serving. These are great and inspiring, but also very useful to think about cultivating a climate and culture of peer support on a team. So these are fantastic. I don't know if you see the same thing I'm seeing, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, I am seeing that, Eric, and there's a lot of creativity here, which I think is fantastic. And basically, several of you have said in different ways, is just making sure that whatever you're doing, that there's an opportunity for your members to engage. So whether that's in meetings or other types of communications, that you've intentionally built in time or opportunity for them to engage with each other throughout that. And then, if you can make it fun, all the better, right? So a lot of creative ideas here around team building, around engagement, and just getting folks in the mood or in the mindset to connect with each other around their needs and resources. So great work again, something I definitely often see from leaders, so not a surprise how great you are at coming up with these ideas. All right, so keep adding here for sure. I'm going to capture these, and afterwards, when I post the recording, I'll have a collection of these ideas in a document, so that way you'll have all these from your colleagues. We're going to move on and coming to time to wrap up. So Eric's got a different type of question for you now.
Yes, indeed. One final question for you that will actually be via a poll. and we're checking to see how well you've been following along. So when you see the poll pop up, we're asking the question, which of these is a coaching strategy that leaders can use to support members effectively? And your options are providing direction and resources members should use, give the member time to settle in before setting up regular meetings or check-ins, setting clear expectations for completing goals in the VAD, or holding members accountable for meeting their professional goals. Make your selection and make sure to click submit. We'll give you a little bit more time so you can have a chance to participate, and thank you in advance. Again, we'll give you a little bit more time. Looks like a good number of people have responded to the poll question on the screen. Which of these is a coaching strategy that leaders can use to support members effectively? And just a reminder, once you make your selection, don't forget to click submit. Okay, I think we have a good number of responses, so we'll go ahead and close the poll, and we will show the correct answer, which is D, hold members accountable for meeting their professional goals. Thank you for responding to that question. If you got it right, congratulations. Next, I'll turn it to Andy for some final recommendations for further study.
All right. So we've touched on a lot of things in this session, and you might be wondering where you can get some more information. So on the VISTA campus, there are 3 on-demand webinars. I mentioned these already. They might be of interest. All 3 of them are found in a learning path called Supporting VISTA Members. And in there, you'll find these 3 webinars, Supporting Members Through Effective Check-ins, Coaching Skills for VISTA Leaders, and Onboarding Practices that empower members. The last 2, the Coaching Skills and Onboarding Practices, they have excellent handouts that go along with the presentation, and they'll provide you with some immediately usable resources that you could implement with your members. And earlier, I talked about fostering peer support. Here's a great example that does just that. There's a group of VISTA leaders who get together over Zoom every month to talk about a range of topics relating to serving as a leader. The group is led by leaders, so it's a peer opportunity. They gather input from participants to pick up the topics for upcoming meetings, and they're always welcoming new participants. So I encourage you, if you're interested, if you're a VISTA leader and you're interested in joining the group, to email for details on the next meeting. So I want to thank you for being with us today, and thanks for all your efforts to support your members.
And before you leave today, we'd really like your input to ask you to complete a short evaluation of the webinar. You'll see a link in the chat. Your feedback will help us make these sessions most useful for you and other VISTA leaders. So please, please, please take 2 to 3 minutes to complete this survey either now or soon after the webinar is over. And so next we'll take a look to see, I don't see any questions that have come in. So we will continue to move on, but thank you. Maybe that's a great sign. I do want to mention our next webinar for leaders is going to be about facilitating effective meetings, which are critically important. It'll occur on Thursday, November 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope that you'll join us. I do want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our presenter, Andy King, for sharing with us today. I also want to thank our instructional designers, Bethany Dusablon and Elizabeth Floyd, and our producer, Stephen Gray, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much for sharing and have a wonderful day.